Hello and welcome to the CRM Zen Show, where we talk about all things Zoho. This is episode 313. I must kiosk you a question recorded for Friday, July 26th, 2024. From Zenatta Consulting, I'm Tyler Colt.
And I'm Greg Belnap, and let's get right on into the show.
All right, let us do it. So Greg, of course, thanks for jumping in this week while Brett is out of office. We do have a busy news week, but always good to see you. You've done kind of a refresh on the facial hair since I think last time you were on the show.
Yes,
never
kind of
forget
going
that time that you surprised me on a client call with the Magnum PI mustache. Always lives on in my dreams and nightmares.
Yes, you had to turn off your camera and mute yourself for a second, pretend you had technical difficulties while you are just keeling over, laughing at your desk. But yes, now I'm going for like a bit of a Three Musketeers look.
I like
D'Artagnan.
That's working for me. For the listeners only, you'll have to go over to YouTube and check it out there to see what Greg has done with his illustrious facial hair. I've been growing mine out for a couple weeks, you can see all the growth coming in. Nice, thick, bushy beard. Again, a lot of people listen to this only, so maybe they'll believe that lie. And with that, let us jump right on into the news.
Are you looking into starting a podcast? Or maybe just need some help putting it all together so you could focus on your voice telling your story? Introducing Podcaster Zen. From audio podcasts to video to live streaming a show, we do it all. Head over to podcasterzen.com for more info on how we can help you share your message with the world.
All right, so let us jump into the first story here. This is from Zoho Workerly. Workerly, we don't talk about too much. It's kind of the tool for managing contract employees and shift labor. Looks a lot like CRM and does work pretty well for that use case. It's kind of a minor update. They've essentially added a create shift button. This is one that I did have to read twice to make sure I understood it. So you already could create a shift. Just to highlight that, of course, this is a tool about shift management. But really the difference is previously a shift kind of had to be done from a particular job or from a particular account. Now, if you're watching us on YouTube, you can see you kind of have this like general shift creation button so that you're not having to go to a particular job or client to do that. I will say, I would imagine if I were using this tool, a lot of the times I probably would go to a particular client or job just because like those are already going to be required for creating a shift anyways. So in my head, like that's how I would do it, but there must have been some requests to make this just a little bit more flexible. You can kind of do it from this jobs list as well, which is kind of nice. So they've added it to a few different places, but yeah, kind of a minor one, but I'm sure a couple people were asking for this in Workerly, so they went ahead and added it.
Yeah, it's development of applications is sort of like a flowing river. Just, there's some little tributaries that you don't initially know need to connect somewhere else. And then you're like, oh, okay. Because everybody keeps going click, 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 click. How about we just make one click for them? But you don't really know that until you actually set them free and set them loose in your app.
Yeah, it's kind of like when you're walking around and you'll see like two sidewalks that connect at a 90-degree angle and then that kind of trotted path between them at a diagonal. It's like maybe the sidewalk should just be there. Maybe the button should just be over here. Make that a little easier to shortcut. So nothing major, but a nice one if you're using Workerly. With that, next story here comes from Bigin, getting bigger. So they've added some new functionality to Bigin forms. So handful of things at a high level. You can now add your company logo. You can do a background with images. You can have sections, and then you can customize buttons. So kind of like that submit button. These are nice. I don't think, if I'm wrong, I don't think these are supported in the CRM web forms, are they? I don't think this update exists over there. I'm pretty sure those are still pretty basic. So interesting that Bigin's forms are getting a little more robust than the CRM tools. I do like sections a lot, though, as kind of a general rule of thumb for making forms.
Yeah. I mean, my best guess would be that I think 90% of people that are using the CRM are also just using Zoho forms. And so what, you don't really need to push it. Whereas Bigin is sold as a nice, light, all-in-one kind of, CRM light solution. And so you want more of these features baked in to something like Bigin, whereas the CRM, most people are using external tools still within the Zoho ecosystem anyway.
Yeah, that is true. The one thing I would like, though, with these, if we can get there with the CRM web forms, is that the CRM web forms do actually work really well with the native Google Ads plugin for Zoho CRM, which does a good job at just grabbing like all of that UTM data natively. So if they were a little more robust, I think more people would use them. Though I have actually seen a new little thing inside of the Zoho forms that claims it can work with the CRM AdWords plugin that I would be interested in playing around a little bit.
Well, Forms did recently add in some like GCLID stuff, didn't they? Just a couple of weeks ago. You guys had a story about that?
Yep, getting better and better with tracking those. But yeah, this is nice. I mean, again, I'm always kind of surprised, I guess, when like a big feature update comes to Bigin instead of CRM, just because you'd imagine it'd be the other way around. But hopefully they'll kind of just lift some of this stuff, which looks kind of like it was taken from Zoho Forms anyways, and drop it into the CRM forms just to make those a little bit more robust. Because you do have those people that are just using CRM, right? And they do use those web forms. Might love to get a bit more functionality out of them. Next one here from Zoho Rider. This is kind of a funny one. It's cool. I don't know how it got to the top of the list, but hey, there must have been a big request for it. So they've added some new formulas inside of Zoho Rider. So as most listeners probably know, inside a Rider, you can have formula fields that are essentially like doing operations based on other data that's been entered into that document. And what they've done here is essentially give some pre-baked formulas for present value, net present value, and future value. These are just a couple kind of high-level metrics used in business decision-making, kind of like calculate the future cash flow that we would expect from a certain opportunity, and then discount it back to today dollars based on some type of discount rate, oftentimes like an index fund rate of 7-8%. So cool to see. A lot of the times when we're building systems, this calculation would happen in like CRM, and then the output would just flow into the document that way. But I could imagine like if you had more of a fillable document, right? Like maybe you're sending this to a client, they're going to enter some things that they're expecting, right? And then it can kind of calculate them on the fly. So I'd imagine that's probably the use case here is more filled out by a client than filled out by the internal user. So I'm sure this will make someone very, very happy. And it was a good tee up for me to talk to Greg a little about business decision-making metrics before the before the show.
Yes. I was taken all the way back to junior year economics.
Yep.
It's a fun flashback.
Yeah, so a nice one. Writer's always doing fun stuff. It is one cool thing about them. They don't really just sit there and do nothing. A lot of document management tools, basically the same as they've always been, and they will always be that way. So it's always cool to see these things. It's just a more niche one that we thought would be fun to highlight. Next update here, there's a pretty major one. There is an asterisk on it, but it is a pretty major update from Zoho Inventory. So they are rolling out bin locations, essentially the ability to say this stock of this item is in this particular container in this warehouse. This is something that we've had to build very lightweight versions of this custom for some clients, and it never just fully ties into the full process. So they are now rolling out bin locations. Obviously, these are only going to apply for inventory tracked items. And they will work for serial numbers and batch tracking as well. So essentially, you'll be creating bins, mapping items to them, and then as you're associating items with transactions, you'll be able to easily identify which bin a particular unit of stock is coming from. So pretty big one. I don't know if you have any thoughts on this one, Greg, but pretty significant update for inventory.
This has been a kind of a pivotal feature for certain companies, that have wanted to use Zoho Inventory. If you are actually, it kind of just depends on, are you actually running your own warehouse, right? Because some people, you're using Zoho Inventory, but maybe your actual warehousing, manufacturing is done, somewhere else. And so you just have to keep track of, more so accounting stuff. You could like have a general idea of how many warehouse, but if you're actually managing your own warehouse, bin locations are a must have.
Absolutely. Now for the asterisks, I do have to highlight, it reads to me as if there is going to be an advanced warehousing add-on that you will need to purchase. And they do put a link over to the pricing page on where you're supposed to go to purchase this. I could not find it anywhere on this pricing page, so I'm not exactly sure. Oh no, here we go. So 124 per month builds annually for advanced warehousing. This is a beta feature right now. So there will actually be an incremental charge for bin locations that you'll have to keep in mind. So about $120 a month. And then we can get these activated. Now that does come with some other functionality outside of just bin locations. But I did just want to highlight that. This is one that probably be some back and forth discussion on. It's something I would prefer to just see included in the product. This is something that there's such a significant demand for bin locations and they're so ubiquitously used. Like, other than like Greg, you kind of highlighted before the show, some very small organizations, like 5-10 different products might not need this, but a lot of them do. Even like small to mid-size, like a lot of them are going to want this functionality. So I get it. It's just more and more things are kind of being bumped into add-ons and additional pricing models. And I'd like to see that pulled back a little, especially for something that I think for a lot of people, they would define this as core functionality inside of an inventory management platform.
Well, like the Joker said, if you're good at something, never do it for free.
True. Very true. That's why I run ads during the podcast. Next update here. This is another kind of nice one. Like when I first read it, I didn't really think it was a big deal, but the more I've thought about it and like tying into some of the other updates to data prep, this one's pretty significant. So this essentially the ability now is coming to connect data prep as a data source for Zoho Creator. And really, it seems like what they're doing with data prep, the way they're positioning it is like version 1, it was kind of like a quick little cleanup tool that maybe you put some data in before you send it to analytics. And basically just analytics was the output. But since then, they've rolled out the ability to have CRM as an output, as well as Creator now as an output for that data. And it supports a ton of different stuff, right? Like whether it's a different application, whether it's like a cloud storage provider, whether it's a local database. Again, that's a big one, right? Like you've got that SQL server in your basement and you want to interact with that data inside of Creator. There's no REST API integration, right? We're talking about a local device. But with DataBridge and data prep, you can actually get that data in and pump it into your application. So I'm seeing the light more and more on kind of how they're thinking about positioning data prep, just as a way to take a bunch of data sources that are hard to get a hold of, pump them in there, do some of those basic joins and cleanup activities, and then route them into a workflow app like Creator or CRM, just to cut down on the amount of time you're spending like building an integration, right? If it can just be built for you. So this one's pretty cool. I'm sure you've got some thoughts on it, so I can shut up for a bit and let you take the lead here.
It's like you said, data prep, initially started essentially it was just like a macro tool. It was like you had set up a bunch of macros in Zoho Sheets or something to parse these columns into that, put everything in poppercase or uppercase, whatever. The fact that they're slowly pushing data back to these sources is now what'll be really, really big is if eventually they are able to do that for some of those other like non-Zoho databases, which I have no idea how or if you could.
Might be able to. I mean, we'd have to see. It might be specific per connector, right? Like it's obviously a lot harder to push data to a local server than it is to like an Amazon bucket. But it does say push data back, which like has a lot of use cases, right? Anything from like basic like backup functionality all the way to like compliance, right? Some companies on a prospecting or sales call will say like, hey, we want to do all this stuff in Zoho, but we're legally required to have a local backup of everything, right? And it's in our basement. It's on that server. We've had it for 15 years. It's not going anywhere. So just being able to connect this as an easy way to push all that data back, again, just when you're thinking about saving development costs, that's pretty significant.
Yeah, and I'm thinking about, like, I've had some of our own consultants reach out to me recently with questions about, like, hey, I have a client who wants to push data back to this particular service. They don't have a REST API. They have a SOAP API, which we don't want to have to deal with.
Really want to avoid that. Yeah,
there's a reason that REST API is the new norm. But
very nice.
Thank you. So if some kind of connector like this, again, maybe we're just having too high of hopes, but being able to have something like this to push back into that would be huge.
Yeah,
would be. Really,
I'm thinking even recently, there are still people that are on QuickBooks Desktop, right? That's a big one. I don't know that there's a connector for desktop inside of data prep. I know there is one for analytics, but if you could actually pump some data out, process it inside of data prep, and then put it into particular modules or data sets inside of QuickBooks Desktop, that would be huge, right? Because there are some people that just can't leave that for whatever reason. And essentially what we have to tell them is, hey, we'll get you some really nice looking exports. And once a week, you can pull it out and put it in. But there's just very little we can do to get data back in there. So I really like that. I'm seeing the light a little more on data prep. Again, I'm always going to default to doing things with analytics, but if they can standardize, they can actually get data out and back into like local systems, that'll be a huge use case that I think a lot of people will find value in. Next one here from CRM. This is kind of a slick one as well. So essentially what we're talking about here is converting multiple leads at once and creating deals for those leads and assigning additional fields as entries to each of those deals. So really what we're talking about is when you are converting a lead, obviously there's data that you've mapped via lead conversion. That data is all just going to go into the proper fields inside the deal. But what about other stuff, right? So maybe by default, everything converts to stage 1 of your pipeline. But you're converting a handful of leads and you're like, look, these all need to go into stage 2. They've already like pre-qualified or whatever it may be. Essentially what you're able to do now, if you're watching us on YouTube, you can see this little video snippet, but you can just easily select additional fields that you want to set as you're converting a particular group of leads. Again, this is all for groups and mass conversion. And then you can just fill those in, right? And then those values will just be applied to every deal that was created as a part of this conversion process. Really, the only way to do this before, and I don't even know if it worked well for mass conversion, was making fields required on the deal. Right? Anything you would make required would always show up in that lead conversion step, at least when you're doing it one by one. But sometimes you have more that isn't required and you want to put it in anyways. So really nice feature addition here.
Yeah, so it's kind of just like this is like it. This is your chance to overwrite the whatever your default, lead conversion mapping settings are. So any field that you don't define on here will just fall back on whatever your lead conversion settings are. But yeah, slick way to just kind of those ad hoc updates that you need to make.
Yeah, really nice. Now I'm wondering, does this work for individual conversions of leads? Has this always been a thing for those? I know that when you convert an individual lead, you've got the ability to set any of the mandatory fields, but this like UI of just kind of grabbing additional fields on the fly and filling them in is really nice. And if it's not there in individual conversion, I'd hope it would be added soon because
I don't think it is there in individual conversion. I assume that the idea is that like, if you're converting one by itself, you're just going to go to the deal and then just
through and fill it in.
change it yourself.
Yeah, save a couple clicks though. People always like to click less. So if you could do it on one page, be really nice. But no, if they've already figured it out, I wouldn't be surprised if it comes to individuals sooner than later. Last news story here, another interesting one. Essentially what we're talking about here inside of CRM is the ability to trigger a kiosk, so one form of process management, inside of a blueprint transition, so another form of process management. And you might think, like I did when I first read this, why would you ever want to do that? Well, there is functionality inside of kiosks that's not supported inside of blueprints. Really big one that Greg pointed out is like the search for records, right? So a good example would be like, you're in this blueprint, you're selling insurance, right? And you have a blueprint transition for select policy, right? And that could then trigger a little kiosk where you enter some policy info. This is a home. This is their budget. This is the type of coverage they need. And then it could actually run that search against your policies database based on those parameters and give you a filtered list. So kind of saw the light once Greg pointed that out. I actually just came up with that use case on the fly based on what you were talking about earlier. I'm very proud of myself.
I'll take that alley-oop.
Really that search functionality is where I see a lot of the value here, just because it's not supported inside of blueprints. So really cool, right? They're using it for kind of a loan application or any of these other use cases. So yeah, I think this is pretty nice. It's always tricky with Zoho, like they will release so much good functionality, and there's oftentimes just overlap. Like a lot of things about blueprints and kiosks are in fact the same, but not everything. And so there are times where you might want to supplement one with the other. So
yeah,
pretty cool. Finding more and more use case for kiosks. Zoho, if you're listening, the one thing we do need is more action blocks inside of a kiosk. I think the limit is 25 or 50, but you oftentimes have to use a lot of blocks to do something, right? Like you enter this data, that's one block. It does a search, that's another block, right? Like, so you can start stacking them up pretty quickly.
Get away with it.
As you actually get into building, especially if they're more complicated, you can end up with quite a few blocks inside of a kiosk. They've also kind of sneakily added one cool little thing here. They're just raising the limits for kiosks, basically for, I think, all plans. So Enterprise and Zoho 1 are going to have 25, and then the Ultimate and CRM Plus are going to have 50 kiosks that are available. I would imagine this limit might need to go up more and more over time because there's so many ways to use kiosk, right? Like I'm really liking them on home pages. That's one of the places I really like it, because when we're designing a CRM, we always try to give like a salesperson less places to go, right? So if we can have a homepage where it's like new leads today, deals that need proposals, and then something about like, you know, a kiosk to start a process, it just makes their life a lot easier. So I'm really enjoying that functionality from them. And I would imagine that as more and more people kind of pick up everything you can do with this tool, those limits might need to go up again.
Undoubtedly.
All right. So with that, we've wrapped up the news. Let's go ahead and get right on into our implementation of the week. Thanks, Tyler, for that great segue. So the implementation this week is a process that we just put in place for a client of essentially identifying prospect locations, adding those to CRM, and then converting them over to leads once you've gathered the appropriate amount of information. So the use case here is, and this customer has a pretty unique CRM setup where they have these large companies that they're targeting that we put in as accounts. And then we actually have them connect leads to those accounts, because they could have many, many, many different leads at large companies distributed across many different locations. Think like you want to sell through to a large chain of car dealers or an insurance company that has 50 different office locations. And so what they'll do is essentially say, hey, I know that insurance company A has an office in Fort Collins. I don't know anybody there, but I want to target that office and I want to learn who they are and see if there's a fit for business. And they brought this use case to us because their instinct was they didn't really want to make them a lead, right? Because a lead needs a first name, a last name. It's like a person at a company. And I said, good instincts. You don't want to make them as a lead. So we did instead is we made a custom locations module that just connects to that account. And the locations module has less information than the lead does, because the lead, they move through a pretty long, detailed process. And really the goal for the locations is to say, hey, we know they've got an office here. We want to maybe send them a physical mailer or do some web research on this office, but maybe we're not going to do it right now. So I just want to put it in as a placeholder. Then what they can do is over time kind of gradually fill out that location record. It does actually have a section for everything needed to make a lead, like the name and the email and the phone. You might just not have that right away. Once they've actually filled out the location, they know, okay, Greg Belnap is the, head purchaser for this car dealership. They're the claims manager for this insurance office. Now they can go ahead and enter that into the location, press a magic button, and then it converts itself over to a lead connected to the appropriate account. So this is really just a place where we're saying, hey, this data about locations, it's going to get a bit messy, right? We just don't know a lot about them, but we know that we want to learn more. So let's keep them out of leads where we have good info, real people, real phone numbers, good email addresses. And then let's do a bit of that prospecting somewhere else so that we don't have to be so worried about putting junk data into that actual leads working list. So nice little build outs. It's kind of a funny one. I teed myself up for it and I was part of building it. Big shout out to Bruno. He actually came up with the idea for the lead conversion button. For some reason that didn't pop into my head. And he's like, hey, there should probably be a button there. I'm like, yeah, there definitely should. But yeah, kind of a nice one just to keep the leads list clean when you don't have a person. Because you will see some people that'll put like first name Fort Collins, last name office, right?
Yep.
And then you just have to hope that we change that eventually. Otherwise, they get an email saying, hi, Fort Collins. And that's just never a good touch point.
Nope.
So nice little build out. Hopefully we'll keep the leads list really clean.
Yep. It's like we have, that's also why, we have stuff like the CRM Health Check extension that we put out there. You want to keep your data clean. The more often and little ways you can check to keep your data clean, the happier you'll be, because this kind of stuff can get away from you if you're not tackling it little by little as you go. It's like brushing your teeth. You can't just use a whole bottle of toothpaste once a month on one brush and say like, yeah, that'll do me.
Is that not what you're supposed to do? I go to this dentist in the back alley in downtown, and that's always what they tell me to do. So,
yeah.
Anyways, with that, before I unveil more horrible things about my dental health, let us jump into our code share of the week. All right, so this is an Alex code share, and Greg, I will let you take it away.
Thank you very much. So this code share is a real beauty. It's for syncing your CRM to Creator, for syncing records of a certain module from CRM to Creator. Now, normally, you want to try to keep just a single record of truth. Duplicate databases are never fun to deal with. So we always try to make it so that you don't have to do that you just are grabbing things by reference rather than, copying them over. But sometimes it's unavoidable. Sometimes in Creator, just the way that you want to surface or search for data within your Creator app, you need to actually have copies of some of the information in your system.
Yep.
Our own internal Creator portal that we use, we have to have a duplicate database of all of our client names and some of their account information, so that some of our search functionalities inside of Creator can work just a little bit better. So with that, you have to set up some kind of sync. So what Alex has outlined here is a way to create this function that you will add as a workflow rule to an on create and then on a update workflow in the CRM, so that whenever one of those records gets created or changed, it will gather all that together and then upsert into Creator. So either creating a new Creator record if one doesn't exist, or updating one if it already does. So a necessary evil sometimes, but even for those, we've got you covered. So yeah, big shout out to Alex on this one. It's this is one that, like, if you gotta do it this way. You'll do it right. You don't want to. You want to try to keep it as simple as possible. So
yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, nice code share from Alex. And I'm even thinking too, like back to the data prep story, if like creator serves as an intermediate because it connects data prep a little better to send data back to some local service, right? You set up a basic little sync scheduler and then that starts your whole data pipeline. So really nice. Again, like Greg mentioned, we always try to avoid syncing if we have to, but there are cases where there's just no way around it. And you do have to actually have that data. This is a great way to do it. So again, as we always like to remind everybody, over on club.zenatta.com is where we have all of these code shares. Essentially our community where you can be a Zoho nerd with other Zoho nerds, ask questions for us, for other people, look at any of the code share entries, even submit some. We do have some Zoho users that just come in and add code for everybody else to take a look at. So definitely worth a look, totally free. You just got to put in your email address so we know that you're a real person. And then you can enjoy all the free content. We're getting close to 2,000 members here, like very close, dangerously close. So looks like an angel will get another set of wings sooner than later. With that, let's go ahead and jump over to what's new on Zenatta.com. All right. So looks like Wayne has put together an article here on e-commerce and Zoho. We do have a ton of customers that use Zoho, particularly Zoho Inventory, for managing the back-end operations of their e-commerce company. And so Wayne has essentially done a write-up here of everything that connects from, shipping options, e-commerce options, marketing automation to do abandoned cart follow-ups, Zoho Desk for, looking at tickets related to those particular sales that you've made. So really across the board, it's a great backend for these types of operations. I do always like to highlight Zoho Inventory is one of those tools where it's like, take your time and set it up properly the first time, because digging yourself out of the hole is a lot harder than doing it right out of the gate.
Measure
there
twice,
are some best practice. There are some best practice automations. We actually have some YouTube videos on it. If you search our channel, I think Josh had made a couple of like things that we basically do for every e-commerce user that are just like, hey, when an order comes in from Shopify, it's paid. So automatically make the invoice and customer payment, right? So that you're not having a bunch of committed stock that the system doesn't know you've been paid for. So it thinks that it's still stock in hand. There's a lot of those little things that just need to be done out of the gates. But this article does a great job at kind of highlighting some of the different applications behind the scenes in Zoho that can support your e-commerce business. So well worth taking a look at if you are an online seller. Next, we'll go ahead and go over our tip of the week over on YouTube. All right, so tip of the week this week is email scrubbing for Zoho campaigns with clearout.io. It's trying to show me an ad, but I have ad block on. I've noticed YouTube, they're trying to get me. I've been using ad block for so long, and they are getting smarter where now it can't play the ad, but it can make me click to skip the ad. So I'm going to have to update my ad block. So this is a quick video. I think actually an excerpt from our marketing team training program that covers really the core marketing applications inside of Zoho, where he shows you how to scrub and validate your email addresses using a tool called clearout.io. Now, there are a lot of tools that do this. This is one that we like and that we think that the pricing is fair on it. But what this will essentially do is take in a list of email addresses. Here he ran like the sample list that Zoho provides when you just spin up like a new CRM account. You can give them the list and they'll basically give you that list back with a identifier of if this is a safe to email list that is valid, successful, real. So we can see like all these came back as invalid. And then this one, this voice example, that is actually real. It's an email alias that I use for some demo accounts. Not anymore. Now that's in a YouTube video, I'll have to delete it. But the basically just tells you, is an email going to deliver to this? The reason that you care is because if your bounce rate is too high, your domain goes on the naughty list with big domain verification providers, and you're going to see much less deliverability over time. Basically, the assumption that they're making is you bought this list. You don't know these people. These aren't real addresses or they're expired, and you're you're not behaving like a good email sender. So we recommend doing this regularly. You can set up like a trigger-based automation. We love doing that. Like every time a lead is created, we check if it's real, right? Just right out of the gate to make sure that you're never going to be sending bounced emails, or at least that you minimize it as much as possible. And then what he also shows here is how to make a segment of the people that are not invalid, right? Because they might be in there. Yeah, you're going to delete them later, but you need to send right now. Go ahead and just filter them out using your segment criteria and make sure that you're going to maximize that delivery rate and run an effective email campaign.
Yep. Email deliverability stuff is no joke because because it is annoying for everybody to get emails that have nothing to do with you, never have, and even when you click on unsubscribe or whatever, and things still come your way. So companies like, Google and, Microsoft, all those are very, very incentivized to find bad actors and remove them. And we're not all bad actors intentionally. Sometimes it's just because you don't. That's what these tools are for, to help you from being an unintentional bad actor.
Well, and the rule of thumb, I never remember the exact number, but it's like 0.5 or 1% of emails will turn into a bounce each week. Now, obviously, that's a very generalized statement, but it's like people leaving jobs, people getting married and getting a new email address, people getting divorced and getting a new email address, whatever it may be. Some percent of email addresses will become a bounce every single week. So if we were to use Zenatta as an example, the only email marketing that we essentially do is our newsletter once a week. You opt in. We never force opt in anybody. And so we have a very low bounce rate, right? Like everybody who's in there is real. We don't buy lists for anything like that. Let's say we would never do this, don't worry. Let's say we took 3 months off and we didn't send a newsletter for those 3 months, and then we sent one, we would have a high bounce rate. Right? Yeah. Because that's a long time of those bounces not being gradually filtered out with each individual send. And it could be a problem for us. So even if you're somebody who does everything right? And you're like, hey, all of these leads, they opted in. None of this is purchased from Zoom Info. None of this is any of that. If you haven't mailed them in a while, go ahead and do this first. Because you're going to get that warning from Zoho going, hey, you had an 8% bounce rate. That's not good. And generally you'll have some warnings before anything bad really happens, but don't wait, right? Just do it first, be safe about it, make sure that you're not going to mess with your domain. Because once you're on that naughty list, it's non-trivial exercise. Yeah, it is non-trivial to get back off of there. So recommend taking a look at this. It's not expensive. It's like a fractional penny per email address. Go ahead and do it. Save yourself the pain and suffering. You'll be happy you did.
Yep.
All right. And with that, I think we are ready to wrap up for today. Thanks again for joining, Greg. Always a pleasure to have you on the show.
Happy to. I'm happy to be your Scottie Pippen. Just helping set up stuff for you so you can dunk it.
There you go. His son is actually doing great so far in the summer league for the NBA. Scottie Pippen Jr., I think. He's overperforming. Little fun fact if anyone likes NBA. Anyways, I think that'll wrap it up here for the show this week. Thanks again, everybody, for watching and or listening. As always, if you want to get in touch with anybody on the Zenatta team, just head on over to zenatta.com and click on Book a Meeting. On the website is also where you'll find complete episodes of the show, as well as links to all the stories we discussed today. If you want that news delivered to your inbox every Monday morning, be sure to also subscribe to our newsletter.
And if you want access to the code share we did earlier in the show, head over to club.zenatta.com, sign up there, join our community. And if you're looking to get your team trained in less than a week on some of the core Zoho apps, head over to zenatta.com/training and buy your organization a team training course. It's the great value. I've been re-recording a lot of videos myself. We've recently added some courses to campaigns, desks, just a lot of good stuff out there.
Absolutely. And as always, we appreciate when you like and subscribe here on YouTube, as well as your choice of podcast app. We'll see you next Friday. I'm my eye has been twitching this whole time. I wonder if people will be able to notice that. People who listen to the end, now you can go back and see if you can catch my eye twitching constantly.
It's about as noticeable as your beard, so I think you're fine.
Okay, that was harsh of you. I didn't need that today.